Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched well, from the world of John Wick, Ballerina. Let's talk about it. So Ballerina is directed by Len Wiseman, who I just found out was the director behind the Underworld movies starring Kate Beckinsale. Now, I haven't watched a single Underworld movie, so I couldn't tell you anything about those, unfortunately. But it does actually make sense that he was a director behind them, because having watched Ballerina, it's not surprising that someone with ample experience directing a female-led action flick was behind this new film, because it was actually a banger. It was actually a banger, guys. Ballerina is a hell of a time. It is a very, very well directed action movie, and I do think it fits in pretty well in the John Wick universe. Now, here we have a brand new character in Eve, and she is introduced to us as a really young girl whose father is murdered right in front of her eyes by a member of this cult. Now, this cult is led by someone called the Chancellor, and he's actually the leader of a whole village of cult members in like the Alps or somewhere in Eastern Europe, I think, actually. And with this cult, once you enter, you can never leave again, and that's what her father tried to do, but ultimately was killed for it. So poor little Eve ended up being an orphan, but instead of her ending up in the foster care system, here comes Ian McShane ready to take her off to the band of assassins that none other than John Wick is a part of. And you have Angelica Houston returning as the director. So for the first part of this movie, we get to see young little Eve grow into a ballerina slash young female assassin as she takes on her first jobs and gets a feel of the assassin life. And she's quickly racking up a great reputation amongst the organization. She's getting all of those tattoos and everything. Eventually, she stumbles into a henchman that has the same X mark as the man who killed her father, and that sets her in a different path of trying to find out who these people are and how she can get her revenge. Now, when it comes to me and the John Wick franchise, I have always been a fan, okay? I think this franchise is really fun, and I particularly love the myth and the lore surrounding the franchise, which I think the studio at this point has definitely picked up on, because this is not even the first spin-off of the John Wick franchise that we've gotten. They also had that limited series, The Continental, which I was going to check out until I found out that Mel Gibson was gonna be in it, and I was like, hell no, you're gonna catch me watching a show with Mel Gibson. Ew, boo. So I didn't check that one out, unfortunately. But yeah, I do like the idea of the world of John Wick. I love how they've kind of spun these little stories, these myths and these rules and regulations. I love that stuff. Like, I love how this world has been manifested. And so I'm excited for each and every installment of this franchise, particularly if it's going to star John Wick himself, but even if he's just going to be making a cute little cameo appearance like he does in Ballerina. I think the world surrounding John Wick is strong enough to support more than one main character, and so I do think that introducing a new character like Eve, especially as she's portrayed by Ana de Armas, who's fantastic here, was a good move. But I will say a word of warning, a word of caution to Lionsgate. I think they're the ones who are in charge of this franchise. I do think there is a risk of doing too much too soon, too fast, too quickly. As exciting as it is to see different corners of the John Wick universe and you're exploring these new characters within the context of this world, I would just advise Lionsgate to slow down, maybe a scooch, maybe a little bit, because I do think there is a risk of this world being stretched too thin. I don't think it's strong enough to support too many spin-offs. And speaking of John Wick himself, I'm presuming this is an in-between-quel where it's taking place before the end of the last John Wick movie. I think it was John Wick 4, right? I'm presuming this is before chapter like, surely it's not after. And so in that case, he fits in perfectly in this story. I think they used him very, very well. This kind of myth of the Baba Yaga, like, it's just so iconic, and he has that presence. Like Keanu Reeves, as soon as he steps into the room, you're like, oh my god, it's the Bobby. Like, oh my god, shit is about to go down. So like, yeah, they used the character perfectly here. It was sparing, he didn't have too many lines, okay, but his presence was felt and it was hefty. And then you finally get the action sequence with John Wick and Eve, and I think that was done perfectly as well. What I particularly love about the character of Eve is that she's not afraid to get her ass kicked time and time again. We'll talk about Ana de Armas's performance, okay, but she got beat up on several occasions, and that makes sense because as good as she got in training, that's a very different situation to being on the field, okay, and being against others who have done this for many years, whereas she is relatively a newbie. But throughout the film we see her definitely improve, okay, she gets slicker, she gets faster, she gets stronger and smarter. But then here comes the Baba Yaga. Here comes the Baba Yaga ready to give her another licking, and I love that. Like, I love the fact that they didn't try to make her more powerful, more skilled than John Wick, because that would have been crazy. That would have been crazy. It would have opened up to so much Reddit and Twitter discourse. Like, I'm glad that they made it realistic for this world, because John Wick is still, like, he is still the best of the very best. He cannot be beaten. And so the only way that she can come out of this alive is if he allowed like, he literally chose to allow her to pursue this path of revenge. Now, when it comes to the story here, there's nothing overly complicated. It's a pretty simple revenge story, the likes of which we have seen many times, even within this same franchise. But the stories in this franchise are just vessels to take us to the ultimate destination, and that is the action sequences. Similarly, okay, to Mission Impossible, this franchise is all about the action sequences, and I think they absolutely delivered on that with Ballerina. I think having that added element of Eve being a dancer and having that swiftness and flexibility and basically being a Black Widow made for an interesting dynamic in the action sequences, and it was very different to what we see from John Wick. So you could tell that they came from the same organization, but they didn't have exactly the same background or experience. Again, she was eating dirt a lot and that didn't make her like a weak character. It just made her an endearing and relatable character. But it was also really impressive to see her like actually learn lessons on the job, like on the spot, and get better and better as she went on. Like, by the end of the film, she was using all sorts of weapons, she was thinking quickly, and I love that. I love the arc that the character went on. Something that really does stand out in Ballerina is most definitely Ana de Armas herself. She was phenomenal in this film. I really liked the character of Eve. I thought she was so badass, and again, I like the fact that she wasn't perfect and polished from the very beginning. She definitely had to learn a few things, and even by the end she wasn't like absolutely perfect. So there's definitely ways for the character to go. Okay, there's definitely places for her to go in the future, which opens up opportunities and possibilities for sequels, question mark. But as it stands, I love the direction that they took the character in. She has a lot of vulnerability, a lot of pain, but also a lot of anger, which is something that Angelica Houston's director character sees in her, and it made for a really compelling character to be invested in during this revenge storyline. And I think it's so cool how just in a matter of a few years, Ana de Armas went from being like eye candy and a Bond girl in the previous Bond movie to being the main character, the main protagonist in her own action flick. And the wider cast here is great as well. I mean, you have our returning favorites like John Wick himself, Keanu Reeves, and you have Ian McShane's manager character who's iconic, and then even more so you have Lance Reddick in what I think is his final performance, especially within this franchise. R.I.P. to him, man. It was devastating seeing him on screen, but I am so happy that he will always be a part of this franchise and will always have that thumbprint in it, because he's such an iconic actor. actor. And then we also had the inclusion of none other than Diego. Diego from the Umbrella Academy, aka David Castaneda, who was really cool as Eve's dad at the beginning. He got his own action sequence as well, thank you very much. He's been practicing from his Umbrella Academy days, so I'm glad that they made use of that and he was able to shine at the beginning there before being sadly murdered. So overall, guys, I had a really fun time with Ballerina. I thought it was a strong entry into the John Wick franchise, pretty consistent with the other John Wick movies. The fact that they've been able to maintain that quality says a lot about the filmmakers that they brought on board, but also Chad Stahelski, who of course has been there from the very beginning and acts as producer here as well. And I think the fact that this film is a cute little 1 hour and a half was perfect. It meant that it didn't overstay its welcome. They weren't dragging it out or anything, but they managed to cram in a lot of story, a lot of lore, and a lot of good action sequences to make it a really impactful, action-filled introduction to this brand new protagonist in the John Wick franchise. So with all of that being said, guys, I'm going to be giving Ballerina a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Ballerina, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.